All right, so Queen Victoria. I think she was into some freaky stuff back in the day. What do you think, Sean?
Absolutely.
When she was younger? Yeah.
I think when she was older, I mean, she slept with a cast of her husband's dead hand for the rest of her life. So, I think she was.
Oh, that's right, too. I forgot about that, yeah. See, I was thinking the younger years, because I went, she was pretty good looking when she was younger, wouldn't you say? She was a pog, wouldn't you say? Like the black men say on the internet.
A what?
A pog. Look it up. Also, not
the definition on the screen.
Yeah, please, because not a cardboard disc that was hit with a plastic disc.
No, not those things. I spent hundreds of dollars on those back in the early. There was one summer I spent hundreds of dollars on those, and I ruined my life on Pogs. Not the pretty ass white girls, but that would come later. This was in the mid '90s, and I remember I blew all of my money from my birthday and like whatever money I scrounged through the summer on those fucking Pogs, and. It was horrible. It was worse than cocaine. With inflation, worse than cocaine. But anyway.
Jesus, we're starting off early today, aren't we?
Back to Queen Victoria. Remember, I went down that dark rabbit hole about all of the piercings that they had back in the Victorian days.
Yes,
We know
of course.
Prince Albert, the dick piercing.
That's right.
Definitely had that.
Yeah,
and
what did they say?
Yeah, so there you go, folks. You heard it from us. Queen Victoria had a clear hood I will say pussy, I'll say it. Piercing. Anyway, we're not here to talk about general piercings, not today. Creepy Dave.
Maybe not ever, I don't know.
We are rolling and we have so much for Instagram right now.
Okay, good. All right, folks. Welcome to Tell Me a Story.
Yeah.
And what a time it's going to be. Episode 7, is it?
It is. Lucky number 7.
Lucky number 7. Okay. This is a good one, folks. Of course, if you don't know by now, I am Tom Daly here with my best friend in the entire world, the doctor of history, Sean McCarthy. Sean, how are you?
The very best, yeah. Really looking forward to this episode. This is a really interesting story, and I bet you'd never heard it before.
Oh, yeah. So, basically, what I was trying to get at with Queen Victoria and her freakiness, she was into puppets. She liked puppets, and we have some very wonderful puppets behind us here today, all thanks to you-know-who, Creepy Dave. Of course he has puppets.
Obviously.
So he brought his puppets along to cheer us on, and I blame the puppets for any mistakes or any weird things I say in the next few moments. Anyway, Queen Victoria loved puppets, and it just so happens we're going to talk about a puppet master, if you will, from our little part of the world. Yeah, from a little town called Bathurst, just north of here. Bathurst, as it's known among the Acadian folks. And so this fellow, his name was Patrick Baldwin. Sean, what can we say? What more can we talk about this guy?
Yeah, I mean, this guy was a very interesting fellow, born on St. Patrick's Day, so probably where he got his name from, in 1860, but born without his arms. And a very small fellow at adulthood. He only measured about 3 feet tall.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, poor fellow, born with no arms. Only 3 feet tall. Mm-hmm. Obviously, back in those days, what year is this now?
1860. So
1860. Yeah. Okay, so you're a dwarf with no arms. It's not like the foreman at the mill is going to come calling. There's no.
Yeah, I mean it's probably especially with 19th century ideas about things
right.
that your options for life maybe certainly were very limited. And at an early age, I think by the age of 20 or 22, both of his parents are gone as well. They both pass away.
So tough life. This poor guy is left with no one to look after him, but he's good at the arts, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, I mean, from an early age, he learns how to use his feet instead of his hands, and becomes very skilled at writing and painting and. So again, an artist, as you say.
All right, so Mr. Patrick Baldwin, he joins the circus, or the circus finds him.
Yeah.
Traveling circus back in those days, and not to be politically incorrect, but it's not that kind of podcast anyway. He joins what you would call a Victorian freak show in those days, pretty much, isn't it? There's a lot of people with deformities. Yeah. So,
Unfortunately, yeah.
And they're making their way all around this part of the country, but they go a lot further as well.
Yeah, I mean, in his life, from the age of about 20, as we talked about, out till really, into his 50s. I mean, he's traveling all around North America, and then, of course, over to Europe. He travels to England 8 times, and even makes it as far as Australia, part of these various shows, either acting independently or as part of different operations. Now, I know some of the articles that read, but he was part of P.T. Barnum's show.
Okay.
So he was, again, doing a lot of traveling for sure.
Big one. The WWE of freak shows, if you will. Doesn't get any bigger than P.T. Barnum back in those days. So,
P.T. Barnum almost as controversial probably as Vince McMahon himself.
oh yeah.
For different reasons, of course, but
We'll go down that road.
we certainly will.
We certainly will. Lots of wrestling talk to come. So yeah, this little man, he makes his way all through the United States. When is his first appearance that we have in the...
I'm not sure now. The earliest one that there's reference to, now I couldn't find an article about it, but in 1878 it said that he does get a presentation before Queen Victoria and also Pope Leo XIII, the recently elected Pope. Yeah.
Wow. So right off the bat, he's meeting the Queen of not just England, the Empire. There was no more famous woman at that time to meet than Queen Victoria. So
18 years old.
18 years old, performing for Queen Victoria. Wow. She's an interesting one. I was being very flippant at the first say about Queen Victoria, but she always had a love for freaks, for lack of a better word. There's stories I know about the Elephant Man, for example.
Sure.
We all know the Elephant Man, the best known of the Victorian freak show folk. He was invited to Windsor Castle and Buckingham Palace many times, and would chat with the Queen, and she was very fond of him because he was very well read and very intelligent. And they say Queen Victoria didn't really care about looks; it was all about the fact that you were well read and well spoken. That went a long way. So. Interesting. She fell in love with the circus, I believe, as a child. Victoria was only child, too, so she went to a lot of circuses, and she saw a lot of strange people. So, interesting.
And that was a key part of the monarchy, too, was that idea of kind of being seen of, giving back.
Yes.
In a lot of the research that I've done, there's a lot of patronage for, I did my dissertation on Queen Alexandra, who would have been Queen Victoria's daughter-in-law, and her work with incurables, with the blind, with people in the community who were, disadvantaged in some way. So it certainly tracks.
Interesting. And if I was married to a kinky German guy with a dick piercing, I know after he passed away, I'd like to look for more adventurous folks anyway. So maybe that's why she hung out with fellows like the puppet master here. So who do you meet first? Queen Victoria and then Leo?
I would think so. I don't know, but it just said that, in that year she met them both. He met them both. Yeah.
And Pope Leo, too. He's an interesting cat.
The longest reigning pope ever. Yeah.
True. And what I'm thinking is this is the guy that had the vision. Are you familiar with that story? Yeah.
Just a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. From what I understand, he had a vision of the devil and God having a conversation. And these are always the scariest stories. This is like the story of Job, where God and the devil are just hanging out in the bar, having a few drinks, betting on humanity. It's the scariest stories you'll ever hear. So basically, this one goes, the Pope is, watching God and the devil talking, and basically the devil says, for the next time, I am going to destroy your church. And God, of course, calls him out and says, how long do you need? And the devil says, 100 years. And God says, okay, you can have your 100 years. Do your worst is basically how it goes. So the Pope witnesses this vision back in 1884, I do believe. So immediately what does he do? He writes a prayer to St. Michael. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us this day in battle, be our protection against the malice and snares of the wicked one, as we humbly beseech thee to command him, O defender of the heavenly hosts, by the divine power, thrust into hell Satan and all evil spirits too. That one. So he writes this prayer asking for St. Michael's help to, defend the church for the next 100 years. And 1884 to about 1984, that was a rough 100 years, I must say. Not just for the Catholic Church, but for Christianity and humanity as well, wasn't it?
This is very true, yes.
All right, but we're not here to talk about that sort of thing. Back to happier stuff, like this poor deformed man who traveled in a Victorian freak show performing. So after he wraps up, that's something. Imagine going from performing to performing rather for the Queen and the Pope, and then back to reality. And these small towns he's going to probably, and yeah.
It seems like that he's kind of traveling just on a bit of a circuit. Like I say, he comes back to England 7 more times and may have visited the Queen again in 1895. There's a record. There's an article that does mention that. So it's sort of kind of like not to be flippant, but like wrestling. You're kind of doing your you're doing your A towns, you're doing your B towns, and
exactly.
you're just sort of making the circuit, right?
A towns, B towns is a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
All right. So, now you might be thinking, anybody watching this or listening, that this story sounds incredibly insane. And if you go online and look on Google, you'll probably find the same thing I did, which is an old CBC article, I think, from some years ago, the Bathurst Museum. They got a few photos. 2013. Thank you, Doctor of History. They've got a few of the puppets he had, and that's about it. There was no photos of the man or anything like that. But all thanks to this guy, the chipmunk over here. If there is a historic nut out there, he will dig dig
there you go.
and dig until he finds it.
If there's ever a historic nut, it's me. But anyway, But I was very fortunate through a number of subscription-based platforms. I was able to find some articles on this guy. Yeah.
All right. And the first one, Sean, you want to read it?
Sure. So this one is taken in 1884 in Kansas City. So this is an advertisement at the Kansas City Museum. There's been an entire change in program commencing Sunday, June 15th, the first appearance of Lwando Baldwin, the Armless Wonder. So we think that maybe Lwando was a stage name.
A stage name, correct.
Yeah, so that's it. Alongside Professor Harrington, the wonderful illusionist, John Davis, the human salamander, Victorelli, the greatest of all jugglers. The auditorium will present the laughable musical comedy entitled The Mulcahy's and the McFaddens, which I'm sure is a very sensible and articulate presentation of Irish culture.
Just two mix drunk beating the shit out of
Probably
each other.
so, yeah.
Just like the Irish Festival.
Faith and Begora. So open daily from 1 to 10 p.m. Admission for all, 10 cents.
Ooh, it's a good deal. And what I have here is a newspaper article from Lincoln, Nebraska, all the way back in 1885. Lwando Baldwin, the armless midget, one of the curiosities in Curiosity Hall at the museum, appeared in the auditorium last night and favored the audience with some very fine vocal music. The little man is not only a freak of nature, but also quite a vocal artist. He called out the second tune. So that's interesting. He's not just a puppet master, is he? He's also, he's got some pipes on him. He can sing.
Yeah, it seems like that was sort of the early part of his performance seemed to be kind of focused more on his ability to kind of do everyday tasks with his feet and then also to be able to sing. Yeah.
Interesting stuff. All right, Sean. So my eyes are not that great, so I'll get you to read that one there. And this is a good one.
Yeah, they say 1887. So unfortunately, some bad luck befalls Professor Baldwin in New York City that year. Since Lwando Baldwin, the Armless Wonder, left Bathurst, his native place, about 4 years ago to make his fortune in the museums and circuses in the neighboring republic, very little has been heard of him. He seems to have met with much success in his exhibition business, which, however, has terminated very unluckily, which brings the queer little fellow to our notice once again. There was something of a sensation, says the New York paper under the date October 29th, at the police headquarters yesterday afternoon, when a muscular man strode in and with a little bundle under his arms. He went into the Bureau of Information and there set the bundle down at his feet. Then it shook itself and proved to be a queer little man, and who explained with dignity, despite his 3.5 feet in height, that he was Lwando Baldwin, the Armless Wonder. The little fellow who had a clubbed foot, crooked legs, no arms, but an intelligence that became quite expressive when he talked. This was the pitiful story he told. He was traveling about the country with a circus, exhibiting himself as a freak for $50 a week. Last week, the circus disbanded at Frenchtown, New Jersey, and Friday night, he and his wife, a woman of about 30 years and of average size, took the Pennsylvania Railway train into New York City. They had with them several trunks and $250 which they had saved. When they arrived in town, they went to a lodging house at 441 Greenwich Street, where they remained until yesterday morning. About 9 o'clock, Mrs. Baldwin went out to buy her husband some breakfast, taking with her the money and the trunk checks. Since then, she has not been seen. Baldwin has, in consequence of her disappearance, been left destitute. His only friend in New York City was a sister named Turgeon, and whose name was not in the directory and whose address the little fellow did not know. The armless wonder has a number of friends and relatives living about Bathurst who will regret to learn of the fellow's hardships. He was on his way to Boston, which he had secured an engagement at a museum when he got into his plight. Baldwin is now 25 years old, and it is said writes and draws with his toes with as good a result as any experienced draftsman. So unfortunately, his wife did him dirty, I guess, Really
Isn't that the way?
Yeah.
Ah, poor guy. So this woman, his wife, just rips him off, takes all his money. And what, $250 for that?
$250,
That's a lot of money back in
yeah,
those days.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Wow.
Absolutely. It was said, I read an article in 1970, talks about his first wife being kind of a musical performer, so she would kind of do like the background music for his vocal performances.
Okay.
So that's...
Never trust those women in the arts. They bring you nothing but misery. Nothing but misery, trust me.
I guess so. But it's hard to argue in this case.
So, and again, I think we were talking about this earlier, just his image of he's being carried in a basket. So probably the strong guy from the circus, you were
Maybe,
thinking?
That's it. I mean, he's probably the only people other than his sister that are mentioned,
Yes.
that he would know would be his fellow performers.
Yeah. So poor little guy. He should have got his ass down to Chinatown and learned some kung fu to kick this bitch's face in.
Well, it's hard to say, but that's it.
And I just picture too, like these Irish cops in New York back then.
Yeah,
Queer little fella. You queer little fella. It says queer little fella.
it does. It's done several times.
Several
that's for
times
sure. Yeah,
in that.
that's it.
All right, what I got before me here is an article from 1890, Fort Wayne, Indiana. Notwithstanding the strong counter-attraction last evening, the World Museum was filled to the doors with a delighted audience. 2 stage performances were given. Big Eliza still remains the center of attraction. Captain Baldwin, the armless wonder who writes and paints with his feet, has become a favorite with the visitors at the museum and finds more patrons for his pretty paintings than he can supply. 15 cherubs have already been listed for the baby show, which begins Monday, March the 3rd, and manager Geary is confident it will be a great success. Captain Baldwin, the armless wonder, who has been filling an engaged Gary's Point Museum, will leave tomorrow for Pittsburgh in company with his manager, A. Gump. Any relation to Forrest Gump? Possibly.
Maybe.
The captain is a marvel, born without arms. He, at an early age, cultivated the difficult feat of using his feet to answer their purpose. He has controlled them to that extent that he eats, writes, and performs many remarkable things with expert quickness. So there you go. And Big Eliza, we were looking into her earlier, weren't we?
Yes, indeed. Basically, the was referred to as the Kentucky Giant, was I guess is what you would call like a fat lady, I guess.
About 180 pounds, which is really interesting because I think I saw 10 women larger than that on the drive over. So how times have changed. How times have changed. It's your turn, Sean. Here we have.
So this is 1895, and this is in the Woodstock paper, but refers to Professor Baldwin in Boston. So Miss Annie Eva Fay, who has been delighting and mystifying large numbers of citizens this week, does not appear to have a monopoly on the White Mahatma business. It is noticed that Professor and Mrs. Baldwin have been giving similar entertainment in Boston all last week. At the Bowdoin and Square Theatre. Professor Baldwin claims to have baffled even the wonder workers of the Far East with his dexterity and skill, to such an extent that he has been hailed as the Great White Mahatma. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what that's in reference to, but
that's a hell of a
yeah.
gimmick.
Well,
The White Mahatma.
yeah, that's it.
He
So,
learned his lesson. You're not going to try a guy called the White Mahatma. You're not going to steal from that guy.
well, I don't know. That's it. Yeah, exactly. If he's strong enough to appropriate Indian culture, I suppose, that's it. Who knows? Of Mrs. Baldwin, among other things, it says, she looks into the brains of her audience and tells their innermost thoughts without the clue of any kind for a beginning. She answers questions that have never left their minds and then repeats the query accurately. So I think this is Professor Baldwin's second wife, Helena Chamberlain, who also was a part of his show, and according to this anyway, may have been a clairvoyant of some kind.
Yeah, she's got some powers. She can see the future. Spooky.
Into the minds of the audience members. Yeah,
That's a good talent to have.
Sure.
She's going to rip off this poor guy. Maybe she can help him track down the first one who stole the money.
maybe.
I know what he's up to. Yeah. All right. I have an article here from 1899, this time from Fredericton. He's back in New Brunswick. A marvelous performance. Some few citizens who have had the privilege of seeing the armless wonder, Lewando Baldwin, say that his performances of writing and drawing with his toes are simply marvelous. Then Professor Baldwin is a ventriloquist of more than ordinary cleverness. Professor Baldwin will give an exhibition in YMCA Hall on Thursday evening. He will be assisted in the evening's entertainment by Miss Alice Worth, better known as the Australian Wonder, a marvelously gifted lady who gives most astounding exhibitions, I almost said something else, of second sight and mind reading. They will appear at YMCA Hall this evening. The performance to commence at 8 o'clock. Admission, adults, 15 cents. Children, just 10 cents. Interesting. All right. So, yeah, again, Professor Baldwin. Have we ever found what he was a professor of, Doctor of History?
No, I don't know. I would question his credentials, perhaps. Maybe I'd like to know where he got his doctorate.
Where did he get his doctorate?
yeah,
that's the
that's it.
question. Wouldn't you like to know that?
that's
And is it true that you can just pretend to be a professor while other people work and slave away the best years of their life for that very degree?
Oh dear, that hits me where I live.
The good news is, Sean, I have some very small print for you to read here.
Yes, indeed. I wonder too if Miss Alice, what's her name? Miss Alice Worth from Australia. I wonder if maybe he might have come along with her during his trip to Australia and maybe brought her, to kind of to be part of his show going forward.
Very interesting, yeah. Because you have to think these, it's got to be a close-knit sort of community. These, freaks, for lack of a better word. We're not trying to be offensive here at all by saying that. And we're no better today. You can look at these articles and be like, oh my God, people are so mean and cruel. No, if these people were alive today, they would have a show on TLC, and they would have more people laughing at them and talking about them behind their back. And they'd probably be in far worse mental health.
It could be argued so. I wonder too if this is a situation where, again, these performers are kind of going out on their own, because again, this is not under somebody else's, jurisdiction or kind of being planned by somebody else. I think at those times, Barnum and others are probably taking the lion's share of the profits themselves.
That's true.
So I wonder if this is a situation where, you and I are going to go put on a show together, and then we'll split the profits rather than having to go through a third party.
Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, to go back to what we were saying, $50 a week, wasn't that the price we heard?
That's what it said in 1887.
That's really good money, though, isn't it? Don't you think? $50 a week back then, because you're not going to make that farming for sure,
No, certainly
and
not.
not even doing some mill job or anything like that. So
No, that's true. That's true. Your best jobs in those days, certainly around here, I mean, you're getting $1 a day.
that's
right?
what I always
So,
heard. Yeah, $1 a day. So this guy he's rolling in money and rolling in all sorts of freaky women.
Well, he's doing well for himself for sure. In 1889, again, kind of continuing on from his time in Fredericton, he's in Chatham, and so this is from the Miramichi Advance, 1899. An armless man has been in town this week, accompanied by his wife and 2 daughters. There's one of the latter, however, being an adopted child. The man's name is William Baldwin, and he is a native of Bathurst, where, having been born on St. Patrick's Day 39 years ago, he went by the nickname of Pat. Mr. Baldwin has traveled all over the world. Well, he was for some years with Barnum and also with Forepaws. Having been born without arms, nature appears to have compensated for the omission by making him an adept in the use of his feet. For he can, with his toes, hold and use knife and fork, grasp and wield a razor in shaving himself, write, button his clothing, put on and remove his hat, and even pick up pins from the floor. He can give entertainments that are quite interesting, including the manipulation of mannequins, ventriloquism, etc., and is a clever singer. Baldwin is less than 3 feet in height, has a well-shaped head, an intelligent face, and withal an interesting personage. So,
Interesting how they say well-shaped head. You know what I mean? And intelligent. You know what I mean? Because they want to clarify this is not a pinhead, or this is not, somebody with like a mental condition, which also got picked up, I do believe.
That's certainly
by the circus.
Another thing too from 1970, the article that I read. Apparently, he would also part of his performance was he would grasp something with his feet, and his strength was such that he would challenge anybody from the audience to come up and try to remove it, and they couldn't. The strength in his feet was such that he could hold on to something as you would with your hand.
Yeah, it must be really good dexterity, or however you would say that, to be able to pick up, say, pins or needles or something. And so that's right. Something very small. Yeah,
I think you can do that, if you kind of train yourself. But of course, most of us don't ever train our feet that way, right?
No.
So,
I don't know. Some ladies in OnlyFans, that might be the next. The next place to go in this brave new world.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first, folks.
You'll hear a lot of things here first.
Whether you want to or not.
Yeah. All right, the article I have before me here is from 1906 in the state of Vermont. It says, East Dover, Miss Rena Powers is ill with the mumps. A.D. Fessiman of Brattleboro is driving team for D.M. Hale. D.S. Prouty is putting some new roofing on his mill this week. This is some very small town news, it must be.
It is.
Mr. and Mrs. G.D. Hale of Brattleboro are guests of D.M. Hale this week. Love that it's just like random gossip,
Yeah.
What are they doing? Mrs. Sophia Grathering of Brattleboro is this week a guest of her daughter, Mrs. W.D. Howe. The frequent rains are having causes. Imagine sitting and reading this. Just like, if you had anything better to do. The frequent rains we are having causes the grass and vegetation to grow wonderfully fast. Many people have not finished planting yet. Here we go. Professor Baldwin, the armless man and the armless man and smallest man in the world. Interesting. That's a new. I feel like he just took that name. With his wife, gave an entertainment at the Baptist Vestry Friday evening. There you go. See, the Baptists heard that he was performing for the Pope and doing what they do best. They had to swoop in there and try to get some of that attention as well, didn't they?
A bit of ecumenism there. You never know.
I think so.
Yeah.
Who knows what shenanigans he was up to. All right. Oh, thank God. That one's really small print, too.
So 1907, Professor Baldwin, back in Fredericton. Professor Baldwin, who claims to be the smallest man in the world and who was born without arms, is in the city today, accompanied by his wife. The professor, who is only 35 inches high, he has the power of using his feet and toes in place of his hands and fingers. The feats he performs with his toes are marvelous. He can write, wind a watch, thread a fine needle, shoot a bow and arrow, light a lamp, use a knife and fork and scissors, and do several things with his toes as easily as any ordinary man can with his hands. He remarked in a joking manner that he would like to put on the gloves with some of our boxing experts. Accompanied by his wife, the professor travels through the country, giving exhibitions of his wonderful feats as well as his ventriloquism. Mrs. Baldwin is also quite clever at sleight of hand performance. They are on their way down river, or where they will show at several places. So yeah, I think also, like I say, again in this article that I read from the North Shore Leader in 1970, pardon me. Apparently Baldwin had a great sense of humor, so again, as you see here, he also would, because he was a ventriloquist, he could throw his voice, and so would often kind of, do practical jokes and kind of play tricks on people, and,
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, you say about a great sense of humor. I guess you'd have to be born, with those challenges or deformities at that time, especially. Humor will get you through a lot of things,
That's
as
true.
we know. So I have the obituary before me here, don't I, Sean? This is the last article we have from 1922. Professor Baldwin, dead. North Shore native, was famous as circus man all over the world. Bathurst, March the 16th. Relatives here have received word of the death of Patrick Baldwin, which occurred at Berryville, Northumberland County, after a lingering illness. Mr. Baldwin, who was born in Bathurst after 62 years ago, was familiarly known as Professor Baldwin, the armless wonder and shortest man in the world. He was a ventriloquist of no mean order, as well as a juggler, performer, using his feet in really marvelous ways. He traveled extensively with various circuses. He made 8 trips to England and several other countries, including Australia. In 1878, he had the honor of being presented to Queen Victoria and later to His Holiness Pope Leo XIII. Besides his wife, formerly Miss
Helena,
thank you, Chamberlain of Holton, Maine, Professor Baldwin is survived by the following relatives: 2 sisters, Mrs. Jas Bellew and Mrs. Arthur Booz. Am I reading that correctly?
yes, Booze.
Great last name. Of Boston. 2 uncles, Henry Baldwin of Bathurst and Nicholas Baldwin of Blue Cove. Honorer Sir A.W.F. Turgeon, Chief Justice of Saskatchewan, Reverend Joseph Turgeon of Dakota, and the Honorable James Gray Turgeon of Regina are his nephews. The funeral took place from Berryville on March the 7th, interment being at Bardybog Cemetery, after services were conducted by Reverend Father Hawks. The pallbearers were M. Hashey, William Tubbert, Francis Albert, John Berry, Francis Berry, and A.J. Ross. Interesting. So is that in Bardybog? He's buried there.
Yes, he is.
St. Peter and Paul?
That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
We should visit him.
Yep. Apparently, there's no stone for him, or at least there wasn't. But the supposition is that he's buried with his wife. His wife remarried.
Okay.
And she passed away in 1967.
Okay.
64, pardon me. So she was the postmistress in Berryville for a number of years and died some years later, having married a Duga or Dugay. So it's believed that he's buried with her and her second husband.
All right, so rest in peace, little man. So what a life, eh? Born with these, like I said, these deformities and these challenges and all that, but at the same time, what a remarkable,
Absolutely, yeah.
adventurous life he had because of that.
Sure,
All because of
certainly,
that, and how he managed to overcome it. He went further than, probably anybody that he would have grown up with at that time. That's insane. That's a lot of land to cover today in modern times, so hopefully, God rest his soul, he had some fun at least. It sounded like he had a good sense of humor, and like I said, those he got to hang out with some wild circus girls.
Well, and again, a lot of things that certainly could have, not only the condition he was born with, but certainly the situation in 1887 could have easily been something that kind of ended that time, right? To kind of sort of overcome that even. Your wife steals all of your money and leaves you destitute somewhere.
Yeah.
But to overcome that and
keep
still have
going.
a big, a big career after that. it's very impressive for sure.
It is, folks. So there you go. That is probably a story you've never heard before. I don't think there's a lot of videos on YouTube or Spotify talking about this guy, the professor,
Exactly.
the captain.
That's right.
Patrick Baldwin, who, met some of the most famous people at the time and crossed that globe and entertained millions.
Exactly.
All right, folks. You see it behind you, not just the puppets, hiding behind the puppets. What's that, Sean?
Exactly. That's some illustrations there by the man behind the camera, David Jardine, also known as Creepy Dave. Yes. So be sure to have a look at his channel, Coffee Doodles. Again, great work that he's doing there. Now, I know there are a lot of fans out there. I've been told about this. This Creepy Dave's got a lot of fans. So I want you to all go over to Coffee Doodles and pay attention to what he's doing over there. Also, Dave has asked me to let you all know, I know there's some of you out there that are very, very, very passionate in your fandom for Creepy Dave. But he wants you to know he's a happily married man. So just calm yourself down.
Stop.
That's it.
Stop spamming us. With
Exactly.
Pages.
That's
Yeah,
it. That's it.
Yeah. People
You
want
know.
hand pictures of Creepy Dave. There's a lot of women out there and men looking for hand pictures of Creepy Dave. Yeah,
Exactly.
they're like, just give us the hands. We want to see that. We want more hands.
Yeah. Respect the man's boundaries. That's all I'm saying. That's it. I'm sure you can go out there and you can find, hands in your own community that are
Those
willing to
hands.
reach out to you.
These hands are still available, folks. Get a look at his hands. Sean, show them the hands.
I'm not really interested. So that's it. Sorry, that's it. Exactly. So just again with that caveat, but certainly go and watch Coffee Doodles. Again, a lot of new episodes on their way. We're really excited to see that channel grow
yes.
As it has over the last number of weeks. So with that, shall we draw to a close?
We'll draw to a close. Thanks everybody for watching, and remember, we're not going away.